Today you're in the historic Zimmerman Library. It was built in 1935, and we're in the conference room, which was one time one of the rooms used for rare books and rare materials, which is pretty appropriate since in front of us here is the 3 millionth volume to the library, which we will be celebrating on April 1st. And that 3 millionth volume is the authentic life of Billy the Kid, one of the probably most important books of Western Americana, certainly for New Mexico, but also for the West, and one of the most rarest as well. We only know of just 6 copies of this particular edition that is autographed in the country, and 3 of those we know are in private hands. One is here, and the other 2 we're not exactly sure where they are, but they're not in any other institution. So it's really a pleasure for us to have this rare material in our library. It's important because it really sets the stage. It is the fountainhead for all Billy the Kid history, or non-history, as you can imagine. The myth, the intertwining of the myth and the legend of Billy the Kid with the facts really stem from this book. Pat Garrett wrote this book in response to a lot of other books being printed in New York City and in the East Coast that really exaggerated the kid and almost made the kid a hero. And Pat Garrett was then being seen as being the guy who ambushed Billy, who killed Billy, and he wanted to set the record straight by writing this biography of Billy the Kid and how it all happened. So it becomes the first account, the only first-hand account we have of what happened that day in July of 1881 in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, and at least from Pat's perspective. And but it is what everybody else takes the facts from, is this book. And since this really is the first edition, the first printing, and an autographed or a complimentary copy by the author, makes it extremely rare, and one that is, I think, almost unheard of even to find now. Like I said, this just so few of these still available, which is funny because they were when they were first published, maybe 1,000 copies were made, but Pat kept a small number of books that are in this special red calf leather binding that really makes it unique. Because, like I said, it is just the presentation copies that Pat made that he gave to important people and dignitaries that had his compliments. The other copies were never bound. They were just loose, and they actually just, the person who had the actual book would either have it bound themselves, perhaps, or leave it unbound. Again, here's the sort of the title page with Billy's picture, and this actually is an engraving from the original, the only known picture of Billy that recently sold for over $2 million, I believe. So it's a really, even the image is pretty rare. But for folks, they were given this and just loose, and then they had to bind it themselves, and that really didn't help the sales as well. And what the story goes is that these were on sale in Santa Fe, and there was a bushel basket of them, not the red ones, but just the other copies, for $0.25 apiece. And they couldn't sell them even for $0.25 apiece. And somebody came by and bought the whole bag, a whole bushel basket of these, and went off. And we should like to know who that was, but we don't know. And consequently, it was not the money maker that they all thought it would be. And of course, because of that, it really is so rare to have that kind of a history with this book. I think the most interesting part is really the culmination of the book, where Pat is pretty sure that Billy is in that house, and he stakes out the house. It's almost like a television detective show where they know that the bad guy is in that house. And they know there's civilians in that house, and how do they go about getting that desperado? And so just the idea when he creeps into the house and goes into the bedroom and confronts, because he doesn't know where Billy is. He doesn't know where, he doesn't even know if he's in the house. Because you imagine there was no lights. It's not like it's electricity. They had kerosene lamps and things, but there was not much light. So you really have Pat venturing into a place he does not know where a murderer might be, and goes into the bedroom of the owner of the house and confronts the owner and pretty much says, "Is he here? Have you seen him?" And that's where Pete Maxwell says he's been around. He doesn't say he's here now. He's been around. So you can imagine Pat's level of anxious anxiety and potentially fear, because you don't know where this murdering fellow is. So when Billy comes down the hall and into the bedroom and says to Pete, who were you talking to? Who are these people out? Because he knows there's people on the front porch. And that's when Pat backs up into the dark corner. And that's the moment in time that a decision is made. Do I take him in alive? Do I try to overpower him? Do I shoot him? What happens? And that's the time that only Pat can tell us about, because he's the only one still around that was there when it happened. So when he says that Billy drew his gun, and because apparently Billy did have a gun and a knife, when he drew his gun and then Pat shot him, it was in Pat's mind it was self-defense, that Billy was going to shoot him. And again, that becomes the real crux of the entire story. Did that really happen that way? Did Billy really raise his gun, or did Pat shoot him? It's this series of these things, so you're waiting for the big climax. So when Pat talks about that, those few minutes of time that really bring all this together, it really is kind of exciting. It's an exciting story. So I think Pat did a good job for that. For a while, Pat Garrett was the darling of New Mexico. He had captured, he had killed the outlaw Billy the Kid. And but within a short time, people started asking the question: Was Billy? Was it a fair fight? Did he really have his gun pulled? Did he really, or was he shot in the back? And all these questions started to be asked about Pat Garrett. What did you really do? So all of a sudden, Pat was feeling like he was becoming the villain instead of the hero. So he then talks to a friend of his named Marshall Upson, who was a journalist from back east, and ask him to, with him, write this book that was the true account, once and for all, of what really happened. I think Pat, more than anybody else, wanted people in New Mexico to read it, because he was in New Mexico and he was feeling, I think, the sting of being now a tyrant, or as the bad guy, when he really saw himself as the hero to the people of New Mexico, but for capturing this fellow and taking this fellow off the streets. So, and even when he was first, when this first happened, when he first killed Billy, the governor had offered a $500 reward for the capture or death of Billy. And when Pat went to get his $500, the governor didn't want to give it to him, and the citizens of New Mexico raised $1,000 to give it to him, because they were so pleased what he did. And again, I think that for Pat, that was important. And I think that when that started to be questioned as to what really happened, and was Billy unarmed, and was Billy shot in the back, and all these rumors started to go around, that Pat really wanted the people of New Mexico to know. And that's why I think that he did not go to an East Coast publisher to publish this, that he wanted it published in Santa Fe so it would be available to people of New Mexico to get and read and learn. And again, that was probably one of the reasons why it wasn't as successful, because it was distribution was bad, and it just didn't get out to where he wanted it to get out. So Pat, in the end, even though he wrote this, for the short term, did not really benefit from getting his story out. But in the long term, this becomes the true, like I said, fountainhead for all stories about Billy the Kid, because it really is from the first-hand account. And you have over the years, and you have people being interviewed who were there either on the porch or came in afterwards, or from even Pete Maxwell saying what really happened. And there's all these different accounts of what really happened. And some folks said that Billy never was shot anyway. He escaped, actually, and the guy there was not Billy the Kid. So even as late as just 3 years ago, they were trying to exhume Billy's body to make sure he was in that grave at Fort Sumner. So there is a lot of questions still unanswered about Billy the Kid, and which makes it so interesting as an historical phenomenon that intertwines fact and fiction and legend and myth all into one person and into this one book. So it's a great thing for us to have, to be able to have for our students and faculty to use and to see that original piece.